First question. How long have you been here and how did it get started?
Me or SOS?
SOS.
SOS was founded in 1985. And it was founded by a group of 6 different congregations of different faiths in southern Oakland County who recognized the need for emergency shelter. There had been a few situations where people had to go to the emergency room or had even frozen to death because there weren't shelters in southern Oakland County. And so the faith community responded by setting up a rotating shelter that went to different churches every week. And it started in the winter, and then it slowly expanded, and now we have over 70 different churches and synagogues that are part of our rotation. And we are a year-round shelter now.
How did you get your job here?
How did I get my job here? Well, before I became the director of SOS, I was the executive director of another homeless service organization in Pontiac called the Hope Warming Center. And that organization only operates in the winter, that program. And the purpose of that program is to keep people, again, from freezing during the winter. And I did that job for about 2 years, and then the director of SOS had moved on to do something else, and their board asked me to come run SOS.
Okay. How many people can you accommodate in this shelter? Do you have a maximum? And what happens when you reach it?
We do. So the shelter program has a maximum of about 35, but because we rotate to different places every week, it fluctuates between 30 and 35. When we reach maximum, unfortunately, we have to refer people to other shelters, and oftentimes all of the shelters are full in our community. There's a lot more need for shelter than there are shelter beds. But our goal isn't to increase the number of shelter beds. Our goal is to move people out of the shelter faster into housing, to open up space in the shelter, because we don't think that shelter is a long-term solution for people.
Okay. Are you full every single night?
Just about, yeah. The only time that we wouldn't be full would be if somebody didn't show up we planned on showing up. And if it was late enough in the evening where they were supposed to come from work late or something like that, and so our offices were closed and we weren't receiving calls for intakes in the evening, it's possible that we would have an opening if that person didn't show up. And that's sometimes how we end up with openings, but most of the time we're full. And the toughest thing is because we're usually full, we often don't have enough openings at the same time to take in a whole family. We do serve a lot of families, but it's sort of hit or miss whether or not there's 4 openings at once or 3 openings at once. But that's something that is part of why we say 30 to 35, is if we have, say 1 opening, but somebody calls and they have 2 children with them, sometimes we'll go over our amount in order to get them into the shelter.
Okay. How do you care for the people?
Well, in our shelter program, our congregation volunteers, of which we have 8,000 a year, people who volunteer with us at all these different churches and synagogues. They prepare 3 meals a day for them. They provide them with transportation to and from our office and to other appointments. They provide them with a place to sleep every night. And while all of that is happening, our case managers work with them to help make sure that they're receiving all the benefits that they're entitled to based on whatever disabilities they may have, based on their income, and help them find housing, which is our biggest focus, is to help them find housing. Once we help them find housing, we focus on making sure that they have access to employment, access to mental health services, access to physical health services, all kinds of things. And we also have a clothing closet here as well, so if people...
Yeah, I saw that back there.
Great. But that's our main focus, is getting them into long-term housing.
Okay. Why do people come here? What are the reasons that they need you?
Well, that's a good question. It's very diverse, the population that we serve. And by that I mean that a lot of people, when they think about somebody who's homeless, they have a stereotype in their mind of somebody who's an addict or who's lazy, and they don't want to work. And the reality is that that's not the case. So the reasons why people lose their homes are very diverse. Most of the time it's an economic issue, but sometimes it's even a domestic violence issue or other conflict in the home. The reasons why they have economic struggles or domestic violence struggles could vary from any kind of disability to a mental health issue to an issue with substance abuse. So in some ways it's a very diverse problem, but in some ways it's a very simple problem because the research shows that for any of those problems, the best solution is housing if the person is homeless. So when a person is homeless, any effort that you make to address any of the barriers in their life outside of their housing is a lot less effective than it is once they're in housing. So we work really hard to move them into housing as quickly as we can, and then we connect them with services in the community for all the other pieces.
Your turn.
No, you're odd on even.
Oh yeah, I'm really sorry. How many shelters are there in the area?
That's a good question. There's different kinds of shelters. There's a domestic in Oakland County. There's a domestic violence shelter called Haven that just specializes on that issue. There's the warming center in Pontiac, and there's a warming center in southern Oakland County as well. There's also an organization that provides a year-long substance abuse program. That's a religious program. But in terms of a year-round shelter that serves both families, people who are chronically homeless, individuals, we're pretty much the only shelter that is a non-specified population, if that makes sense, where we'll serve anybody who's homeless in Oakland County. There's also a few shelters in Detroit. There's a shelter similar to ours in Macomb County, but there aren't nearly enough shelters for the number of people who are displaced from their homes.
Okay.
How do you get people in the community to help and support you? What do they do?
Well, mostly volunteers and through the congregations. Almost half of our budget is really like donated services and materials from our congregations, which is about $1.5 million a year worth of food, shelter, volunteer hours, etc. The rest of our budget is made up through fundraising, so that's the other. Well, we do have some grants as well, but the other part of what people do to help us is participate in our fundraising events, reach out and get their friends involved, make annual gifts to our organization. But a lot of people volunteer either at the congregations or they volunteer here and do things like tutoring or helping people with their resumes or helping them learn how to use the computers, things like that. So it's all over the map.
Do the number of people change during the seasons?
With the season.
With the seasons, I'm sorry, I'm having a tongue issue today.
That's okay. The number of people, so it's a good question. We're full year round. So a lot of people assume that that people need more help in the winter. And there's some truth to that, and that the reason the warming center is open is that for people who are in the area that haven't either left because it's too cold or found another solution, the warming centers are really important. Our shelter, one of the issues is our shelter is not really considered a low barrier shelter. And by that I mean that a warming center will take somebody in even if they're actively intoxicated and not on medication for their mental health, etc., just to save their life. and because of that, it's an environment that isn't very conducive to sheltering a family because it's a lot less safe. So our shelter, we will accept people who are struggling with substance abuse problems and have mental health problems, but we work really hard to make sure that they're compliant with their mental health service provider, and that they're not actually using in our program or drinking in our program. And that's mainly, obviously it's for their benefit, but mainly it's to protect everyone else who's in the program and to make sure we can serve families. What was the original question?
Do the number of people change with the season?
So the reason I say that is that a lot of the people that would normally go into a low barrier shelter are the people that you'll see that are actually sleeping out on the street. So during other times a year, they may camp out somewhere, etc. So there are more people that need emergency shelter in the winter, although a lot of people leave the area as well and go to other locations during the winter, or their relatives feel more compassionate to their situation because it's so cold outside and will let them stay with them. But at SOS, we're full year round, and we have needs for people year round. So the number of people don't change, but their needs change a little bit.
What was I gonna say? Okay, yeah. Is there a way that we can help people other than collecting money?
Of course. We have our clothing closet, so clothing donations are important. We have, one of the things that a lot of groups will do is help us sort our hygiene kits. So we get a lot of like hygiene items donated, soap, shampoo, toothbrush, toothpaste, that kind of stuff. And getting those things donated is really important, and then coming and helping to sort those into kits for our clients is important. Both for clients in our shelter and in the warming centers, we'll often donate completed hygiene kits out to other organizations. Helping to spread the word and educate about that. There's a lot of people who are homeless. There's even a lot of people that are in the public school systems whose parents are homeless or doubled up or staying out of their car, and that has a big impact on people's ability to focus and perform well in school and work. And so helping to destigmatize is the term that we use, which basically means to help people understand that it could be anybody, and that no matter who is looking for services, they deserve just as much help as anyone does. That's important. So education is really important. Yeah, there's lots of ways to get involved.
Do you use technology, and if you do, how?
Sure. Well, obviously in our office we have our basic office equipment and everything. I think one of the more innovative things that we do is we use social media to try to educate the community on the needs of specific people that we're working with, and then we use it to help meet those needs. So we do it in two ways. We have about 13,000, give or take a few hundred people that follow our SOS Facebook page, and that group of people will post to them, we have somebody who just got a new job and they need special boots, or they need to buy their uniform, whatever it is, and people will respond and let us know if they have items that we can use, or we have a family who needs backpacks because school's starting, or whatever it is, and people will respond to that and connect with us through that channel. To expand on that, we started a partnership with a company in San Francisco. They're called Hand Up, and they're a startup technology firm that specifically creates profiles for people who are homeless online, so people can tell their story, explain what their needs are, and then they set a fundraising goal to meet those needs. But the money doesn't go directly to the person, it goes to an organization who's helping that person, who then pays that money to the vendor, meaning that that if you're making the gift, that you're donating to that specific need. The person can't use it for something else. So if they say, I need $500 for a car repair, we can post on our Facebook page, check out so-and-so's profile, they need $500 for a car repair, and then we'll get, $25 here, $50 there donated, and eventually we'll get to the amount. And when we get to the amount, we'll cut a check to the mechanic for that person.
But not give it to the actual homeless person?
The reason we don't do that is so that the person who's donating knows that their money's being used for what is stated on the website. Which is important because a lot of people are afraid to give because of that. When they see somebody on the street who needs help, and they really do need help, they're afraid to give the money because they're afraid that they're going to spend it on something irresponsible, because the assumption, that's about the stigma. The assumption that people have is that if the person's on the street, they must have made bad decisions. That's what got them to the street. So if I give them money, they're going to make bad decisions with the money. And that's not generally true, but it's what people assume. So it's important for us to make sure that the donor knows that the money's being used for the purpose that is stated.
Okay.
Do you help them find homes? Do you help them find furniture?
Yes, we do. Most of our staffing is now focused around our housing program, not our shelter program. So we have a housing department, and that department has case managers that can help with rental assistance, help with locating apartments, help with inspecting apartments to make sure that they qualify for the different programs. We help people with short-term rental assistance who just need a little assistance to get into a house while they're looking for a job. We help people who are chronically homeless, which means they've been homeless for a long time and they have severe disabilities. We'll provide them with permanent rental assistance to keep them off the street and safe. And we'll provide them with supportive services and case management along with that. And we are currently working to try to grow as an organization and start learning how to develop housing, so that right now we do a lot of rental assistance to private landlords. And what we'd like to do is actually develop affordable housing for people, and then we can reinvest that rental money into more affordable housing for people. Because we're not out to make money, we're out to get people into housing. So we do a lot of housing assistance.
Okay.
Do you imagine that one day in the future that the number of homeless people will decrease to the point where you have to close?
I hope so. That's our mission. Our mission is to end homelessness. The South Oakland Shelter stated mission is to work to end homelessness by mobilizing community and faith resources. So we work with the faith community, we work with the secular community, we work with the business community, we work with everyone. And our goal is to end homelessness. So on any given night in Oakland County, there's more than 3,000 people who are homeless. It doesn't mean there's 3,000 a year, that means there's 3,000 on any given night. So when we get somebody out of homelessness, other people fall into it. Our goal is to reduce that number to virtually zero. We know that eventually somebody else will lose their home or whatever the case may be, but that there will always be an immediate emergency response to that, and the person will be moved quickly into housing. Now, we think that there'll always be a need for emergency shelter beds. Will there be a need for 30 emergency shelter beds? We don't know. Probably, because it's a big county, there's a lot of people. But the goal will eventually be to just be a safety net for the few situations where people lose their homes, and we quickly move them back into housing, and we won't have 15 people calling a day that we can't provide shelter to because we're full. So right now, we have 15 unduplicated, meaning that we have much more than 15 people who call us a day. We have 15 new people a day who become homeless, who don't have a place to go, that we have to turn away because we're full. Our hope is that eventually that won't happen, and it's more likely that maybe half of our shelter is full at a time or less. We're moving people quickly into housing. So that's the goal. And if we could close and I lost my job because I was successful at ending homelessness, I would be very happy about that. That would be a good reason to lose my job.
Okay. What will Christmas Eve and Christmas look like here?
Here?
Yeah.
Well, interestingly, because most of our congregations celebrate Christmas, and most of them are Christian congregations, and they have a lot going on in their congregations over Christmas. They generally aren't able to host. So one of our Jewish congregations called Beth Shalom hosts just about every year during Christmas. And it's a really great partnership because the Jewish congregation recognizes that they don't necessarily have special events going on over Christmas, so they can host the shelter. And then they usually have a Christmas party in the social hall for the clients.
I can see that on the board. There's a little bit remains of the congregation things.
Yep. So we, we're working hard to always make sure that we never have a week where we don't have a congregation signed up with us, and that's a full-time job in itself. We have a congregation volunteer coordinator who just works with all of the churches and synagogues year-round to make sure that they have everything they need and that we never have any openings in our schedule. But Christmas and Christmas Eve is a tough one. New Year's and New Year's Eve is another tough one. There's a temple called Temple Israel who usually does their week in December, but because we had an opening over New Year's and it's very hard to fill New Year's, we asked them, since they have a very nice facility, can we use your facility? We know you're using all of your resources and volunteers earlier in December. Can we use your facility over New Year's? And we'll find different organizations to do each night. And they said yes. So we actually have on New Year's Eve.
Party, I guess you could say.
Well, we have three different faiths working together on New Year's Eve. We have Temple Israel, the Muslim Unity Center, and I'm trying to remember the Christian. I think it's a blend of Christian service groups that are coming together to all provide dinner and transportation and everything else that we need on New Year's Eve at Temple Israel, which is really exciting because we're one of the few organizations that we say we're faith-fueled, not faith-based. And what that means is that our energy and passion and inspiration to do this work comes from our faiths, but we're not faith-specific, so we never turn anyone away based on their beliefs. We never force anybody in our program. There's some programs where if you don't participate in their faith programming, you're kicked out of the shelter. But we never encourage, in fact, we tell our congregations that they cannot require anyone in our shelter to participate in their congregation's festivities or ceremonies because everyone's diverse and comes from different backgrounds and has different beliefs, and we want to respect the diversity of the people that are in our program. So what's really unique about us is that we're very faith-driven. We have a lot of people who are very committed to their faiths. Beth Shalom's a great example, who also understand and respect the commitment of others to their faith. So, the fact that Beth Shalom will allow a Christmas party to happen in their conservative synagogue is a testament to everyone's true concern and care for the people that they're serving. And I think that SOS is one of the very few organizations that's a real interfaith expression of care for the community.
If you want to contact our teacher, here's a business card.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Hi, I have a quick question to answer.